a powerful emperor, a forgotten love, and a secret that could change everything. What happens when the past refuses to stay buried? In this gripping historical romance, a ruler haunted by dreams of an unknown woman begins to uncover a love stolen from him. But will he remember the truth before it's too late? Stay with me until the end to find out. Comment below where you're watching from and why you love these stories. Let's dive into this tale of forbidden love and destiny. In the majestic halls of the Romanian imperial palace, Emperor Vladislas Dragomir stood at his chamber window, his imposing figure casting a long shadow across the marble floor. The bitter winter wind howled outside, matching the turmoil in his mind. For weeks now, he had been plagued by the same dream, a mysterious woman with honey-colored eyes, her laughter echoing through corridors of his subconscious, always just out of reach. Each morning, he would wake with an inexplicable sense of loss, as if something precious had been stolen from him. His hands trembled as he reached for the crystal decanter, pouring himself a glass of aged Romanian wine. At 45, Vladislas was known throughout the empire for his stern demeanor and unwavering authority. Yet lately, these dreams had begun to crack his carefully constructed facade. His most trusted advisor, Constantine, had noticed the change in him. "Your Majesty seems troubled," Constantine observed, entering the chamber after a gentle knock. "The dreams again?" Vladislas swirled the wine in his glass, watching the deep red liquid catch the light. "They're becoming more vivid, Constantine. Last night I could almost touch her hand, the sound of her voice. It was like a forgotten melody." In another wing of the palace, Ilinca Stoica moved silently through the servants' quarters, her heart heavy with secrets. At 35, her beauty had only deepened with time. High cheekbones, flowing dark hair, and those distinctive honey-colored eyes that had once captured an emperor's heart. She paused before a mirror, adjusting her modest servant's dress, a far cry from the fine silks she had worn in her youth. "You still look at him the same way," came a gentle voice. It was Maria, the old housekeeper who had been there when everything changed. "After all these years, your eyes never lie, child." Ilinca touched the simple silver chain around her neck, the only remnant of her past life. "Sometimes I wonder if it would have been better to leave Maria, seeing him every day, knowing he doesn't remember." "The heart wants what it wants," Maria replied, placing a weathered hand on Ilinca's shoulder, "even when the mind forgets." The annual winter ball was approaching, and the palace buzzed with preparation. As Ilinca arranged flowers in the grand ballroom, she caught glimpses of Vladislas directing his staff. Each time their eyes met, even briefly, she felt the familiar ache in her chest, the pain of loving someone who had forgotten her entirely. "The white roses should be placed near the entrance," Vladislas commanded, his deep voice carrying across the room. Then, almost to himself, he murmured, "They remind me of something." Ilinca's hands faltered with the arrangement. Those had been her favorite flowers once upon a time. He had filled her garden with them before everything changed. That evening, as nobles from across Romania filled the ballroom in their finest attire, Vladislas found himself distracted. Something about the way the candlelight flickered reminded him of a dance from long ago, a memory that felt just beyond his grasp. As he surveyed the room from his throne, his gaze fell upon Ilinca, who was discreetly refilling wine glasses. Time seemed to stop. There was something about her, something that made his heart race and his head spin. The way she moved through the crowd with natural grace, the subtle tilt of her head, the curve of her neck. It all seemed hauntingly familiar. Without thinking, he rose from his throne, causing a ripple of whispers among the courtiers. He made his way through the crowd, drawn to her like a moth to flame. Ilinca, sensing his approach, nearly dropped her serving tray. Their eyes met, and Vladislas felt a jolt of recognition that he couldn't explain. "Have we," he began, his voice unusually uncertain, "have we met before? Beyond your service here?" Ilinca's heart thundered in her chest. "Your Majesty knows all his servants," she replied carefully, her voice barely above a whisper. "I have served in the palace for many years." "No, it's more than that," he insisted, stepping closer. "When I look at you, I feel..." I remember. He pressed his fingers to his temples, frustration evident in his features. Your Majesty should not trouble himself with such thoughts, Ilinca said, though every word felt like a betrayal. Sometimes our minds play tricks on us. Do they? He challenged, his eyes searching hers. Then why do I dream of eyes exactly like yours? Why does your voice stir memories I can't quite grasp? Later that night, as the ball wound down, Vladislas found himself wandering the empty palace corridors, his mind racing. He turned a corner and there she was again, Ilinca, carrying linens. Their sudden proximity in the narrow hallway made both freeze. Tell me the truth, he demanded softly, reaching out to touch her arm. Who are you to me? Ilinca's hands clutched the linens tighter, her knuckles white with tension. Dreams are curious things, Your Majesty, she managed to say, her voice trembling slightly. Sometimes they show us what we've lost, or what we're meant to find. And what have I lost? He pressed, stepping closer. The scent of lavender and mountain herbs enveloped him, triggering another flash of memory. A garden, laughter, those same honey-colored eyes filled with love. Perhaps some questions are better left unanswered, she whispered, though her heart screamed otherwise. Good night, Your Majesty. Before he could respond, she slipped past him and disappeared into the shadows of the corridor, leaving Vladislas with the distinct sensation that he had just let something incredibly important slip through his fingers. Unknown to both, in the darkness of the corridor, the Dowager Empress watched this exchange with growing alarm. She had worked too hard, sacrificed too much to let old ghosts resurface now. As she retreated to her chambers, she began plotting how to ensure that some memories remained buried forever. Send for Dr. Aldea, she whispered to her most trusted servant. Tell him it's time to strengthen the Emperor's medicine. We cannot risk the past coming back to haunt us. Not now, not ever. The morning after the winter ball, a heavy fog blanketed the palace grounds, as if nature itself conspired to shroud the growing tensions within. Emperor Vladislas Dragomir sat in his private study, dark circles beneath his eyes betraying another sleepless night. The dreams had been more intense than ever, fragments of memories that slipped away like water through his fingers. Your Majesty, Constantine entered, carrying a stack of documents. The trade agreements with the Ottoman Empire await your signature, and the Duchess of Alba Giulia requests an audience regarding the new railway project. He paused, noting the Emperor's distant gaze. Another difficult night, sire. Vladislas ran his fingers through his silver-streaked hair, sighing deeply. Constantine, old friend, these dreams, they're becoming more than mere night visions. Last night I saw her again. Constantine's brow furrowed with concern. The mystery woman, Your Majesty? Yes. Vladislas nodded, his eyes unfocused as he recalled the vivid images. We were in the palace gardens. She was wearing a blue dress, the color of forget-me-nots. She was teaching me the names of flowers in her mother's native tongue, some dialect I've never heard before, and yet in the dream I understood every word. He stood, pacing the ornate carpet. Constantine, it felt so real, the warmth of her hand in mine, the sound of her laughter echoing through the rose bushes, the scent of lavender and mountain herbs. He trailed off, lost in the memory. Constantine shifted uncomfortably. Perhaps, Your Majesty, it would be wise to consult with Dr. Aldea again. He might provide something stronger for your sleep. Vladislas turned sharply, his voice taking on a steely edge. No more medicines, Constantine. They cloud my mind, and I need clarity now more than ever. These aren't just dreams, they're memories, I'm certain of it. But why can't I recall them when I'm awake? Why does it feel like there's a wall in my mind blocking these recollections? Sire, Constantine began cautiously, you've endured great stress in recent years. The border conflicts, the economic reforms. Perhaps your mind is simply seeking solace in pleasant fantasies. The Emperor's eyes narrowed. Fantasies? No, Constantine, this feels like truth. A truth someone has gone to great lengths to hide from me. Meanwhile, in the servants' quarters, Ilinca Stoica was confiding in Maria, her hands trembling as she folded linens. He's starting to remember, Maria. Last night at the ball, The way he looked at me, I could see recognition in his eyes. It was as if, for a moment, the veil lifted. Maria glanced nervously at the door before speaking in hushed tones. "Child, you must be careful. The Dowager Empress has eyes and ears everywhere. Remember what happened to your family when they tried to prevent the separation?" Ilinca's face darkened at the memory, her voice barely above a whisper. "How could I forget? My father's mysterious illness, my mother's sudden accident while traveling." She clutched the silver chain around her neck, the last gift Vladislas had given her before everything changed. "Sometimes I think death would have been kinder than this half-life, watching him every day, seeing no love in his eyes." "Hush now," Maria soothed, patting Ilinca's hand. "The walls have ears and loose tongues lead to tight nooses. You've survived this long by being cautious." "But at what cost, Maria?" Ilinca's eyes brimmed with unshed tears. 15 years of silence, of pretending to be nothing more than a servant in the home that should have been mine. And now, to see him struggling, reaching for memories just beyond his grasp. "Ilinca!" A sharp voice interrupted their conversation. The Dowager Empress's personal maid, Katerina, stood in the doorway, her pinched face radiating disapproval. "Her Imperial Majesty requests your presence. Immediately." The walk to the Dowager's chambers felt interminable. Ilinca's heart pounded against her ribs as she was led into the opulent room where the Emperor's mother waited, elegant and dangerous as a coiled viper. "You've forgotten your place," the Dowager Empress stated coldly, not bothering with pleasantries. Her steel-gray eyes bore into Ilinca with undisguised contempt. "I've been lenient, allowing you to remain in service here, but do not mistake my mercy for weakness." Ilinca stood straight, meeting the older woman's gaze. "I have performed my duties without complaint for 15 years, Your Imperial Majesty. Yet last night you dared to engage the Emperor in private conversation." The Dowager circled her slowly like a predator sizing up its prey. "Do not think I haven't noticed the way you position yourself in his path, how you linger in his presence. Your little machinations have not gone unobserved." "I serve where I am assigned," Ilinca replied carefully, fighting to keep her voice steady. "If my presence disturbs your Imperial Majesty, perhaps I should seek employment elsewhere." "You will do no such thing," the Dowager snapped, her composure cracking for a moment. "You will remain here, where I can watch you. Remember our agreement, Ilinca. Your silence for your life. The Emperor must never remember. The stability of the Empire depends on it." Ilinca's hands clenched at her sides. "And if he remembers on his own? If these dreams he's having led him to the truth?" The Dowager's eyes flashed dangerously. "Then pray you are not implicated in his awakening, my dear. For if you are, I assure you, your fate will make your parents' misfortunes seem like blessings in comparison." As this tense exchange unfolded, Vladislas had retreated to the palace library, searching through old records. Something about the previous night had awakened a desperate need to understand his past. As he pored over documents, a small painting fell from between the pages of an old ledger. The colors had faded, but the image was clear. A young woman in a blue dress, standing among white roses. Her honey-colored eyes seemed to pierce through time itself, stirring something deep within him. His hands shook as he turned the painting over, finding an inscription. "My beloved V, may these roses remind you of our love eternal. Forever yours, I." "I knew I would find you here," a familiar voice interrupted. Dr. Aldea stood in the doorway, his medical bag in hand. "The Dowager Empress is concerned about your sleep patterns, Your Majesty." Vladislas quickly tucked the painting into his jacket. "Tell my mother her concern is noted but unnecessary, Doctor. I am quite capable of managing my own health." "Nevertheless, I've prepared a new tonic," the doctor insisted, producing a small vial filled with an amber liquid. "For the dreams that trouble you, it should provide a dreamless sleep." "These dreams—" Vladislas fixed the doctor with an intense stare, noting how the older man shifted uncomfortably under his gaze. "They don't feel like mere dreams anymore, Aldea. They feel like memories trying to break through a wall in my mind. A wall that perhaps was not naturally built." Dr. Aldea's practiced smile faltered slightly. "The mind is a complex thing, Your Majesty. Sometimes it creates barriers to protect itself from difficult truths. Or perhaps, Vladislas stepped closer, his voice dropping dangerously low, these barriers were created by others for their own purposes. Tell me, doctor, how long have you been in my mother's employ? Before the doctor could respond, a commotion erupted in the hallway. The sound of breaking porcelain was followed by a soft thud. Vladislas rushed out to find Ilinca collapsed on the floor, surrounded by shattered pieces of a vase. Without thinking, he knelt beside her, lifting her head gently. The moment his fingers touched her skin, another memory flashed. The same face, younger, but no less beautiful, looking up at him with love as they danced under the stars. The force of the memory made him gasp. I know you, he whispered, though she was unconscious. Somehow I know you. As he cradled her, he noticed the silver chain around her neck, identical to the one in his dreams. With trembling fingers, he pulled it free, revealing a small locket. Inside was a miniature portrait of a younger version of himself, looking at the artist with undisguised adoration. From the shadows, the Dowager Empress watched, her face a mask of cold fury. The time had come for more decisive action. Some secrets were worth any price to keep buried, and she had already sacrificed too much to let this fragile piece crumble now. Katerina, she whispered to her maid, summon the captain of the guard. Tell him to prepare the northern tower. It seems our guest quarters will be needed sooner than anticipated. As Vladislas called for help, still holding Ilinca close, the pieces of a long-buried puzzle began to shift into place. The wall in his mind was cracking, and through those fissures, a forgotten love was beginning to bloom once more. The morning sun struggled to penetrate the thick fog that had settled over the palace grounds, casting an eerie glow through the ornate windows. Emperor Vladislas paced in his private chambers, the events of the previous night weighing heavily on his mind. The locket he had discovered around Ilinca's neck lay open on his desk, the miniature portrait of his younger self, a testament to a past he couldn't fully recall. A soft knock at the door interrupted his ruminations. "Enter!" he called, his voice rough from lack of sleep. Constantin stepped into the room, concern etched on his weathered face. "Your Majesty, how are you feeling this morning?" Vladislas ran a hand through his disheveled hair. "Like a man waking from a long slumber, Constantine. Tell me, what do you know of the servant woman, Ilinca?" Constantine's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. "She has been in service here for many years, sire. A diligent worker, by all accounts." "And nothing more?" Vladislas pressed, his piercing gaze fixed on his advisor. "No hint of a connection to the royal family? To me?" "Your Majesty," Constantine began cautiously, "perhaps it would be wise to focus on matters of state. The trade negotiations with the Ottoman Empire." "Damn the trade negotiations!" Vladislas exclaimed, slamming his fist on the desk. "I want answers, Constantine. Why do I dream of this woman? Why does her face haunt me? And this locket—" He held up the piece of jewelry. "How do you explain this?" Constantine's composure faltered. "Sire, I am not at liberty to discuss certain matters of the past. Your mother, the Dowager Empress—" "My mother," Vladislas interrupted, his voice cold. "Yes, I think it's time I had a word with her. Where is she?" "The Dowager Empress left for the summer palace early this morning, Your Majesty," Constantine replied, unable to meet the Emperor's eyes. "She mentioned needing rest after the excitement of the ball." Vladislas's eyes narrowed. "And the servant woman, Ilinca? Where is she?" I'm not certain, sire. Perhaps still recovering from her fainting spell." Meanwhile, in a dimly lit room in the northern tower, Ilinca awoke with a start. Her head throbbed, and confusion clouded her mind as she took in her unfamiliar surroundings. The room was sparsely furnished, with heavy curtains blocking most of the natural light. As her eyes adjusted, she realized with growing horror that she was locked in. "Ah, you're awake," came a familiar voice. Katerina, the Dowager Empress's personal maid, emerged from the shadows. "Her Imperial Majesty thought you might need some time to reflect on your position." Ilinca sat up, her voice hoarse. "What is the meaning of this? I've done nothing wrong." Katerina's lips curled into a cold smile. "Nothing wrong? My dear, Your very existence is a threat to the stability of this empire. The Dowager Empress has been most generous in allowing you to remain here all these years. But now, she shook her head. Now you've become a liability. The Emperor, Ilinca began, her heart racing. He's remembering, isn't he? That's why I'm here. What the Emperor thinks he remembers is of no consequence, Katerina snapped. You will remain here until Her Imperial Majesty decides what to do with you. I suggest you pray for her mercy. As Katerina turned to leave, Ilinca called out, You can't keep the truth hidden forever. Love like ours, it finds a way. The door slammed shut, leaving Ilinca alone with her thoughts and the weight of 15 years of silence. Back in the main palace, Vladislas had summoned Dr. Aldea to his study. The physician entered nervously, clutching his medical bag. Your Majesty, Aldea bowed deeply. How may I be of service? Vladislas fixed him with a steely gaze. You can start by telling me the truth, doctor. What exactly have you been giving me all these years? These tonics for dreamless sleep? Aldea's hands trembled slightly. Merely herbal remedies, sire, to ease your mind and help you rest. And yet, Vladislas mused, stepping closer, the moment I refuse your concoctions, my dreams become vivid memories. Curious, don't you think? The mind is a complex organ, Your Majesty. Aldea began, sweat beading on his brow. Sometimes, when we cease certain treatments, unexpected side effects. Side effects? Vladislas interrupted. Or the natural state reasserting itself? Tell me, doctor, how long have you been complicit in this deception? Before Aldea could respond, the door burst open. Maria, the old housekeeper, rushed in, her face pale with worry. Your Majesty, forgive the intrusion, but it's about Ilinca. Silence, Aldea shouted, but it was too late. Vladislas turned to Maria, his voice urgent. What about Ilinca? Speak freely. Maria wrung her hands. She's been taken, sire, to the northern tower. I overheard the guards talking. They say it was on the Dowager Empress's orders. A storm of emotions crossed Vladislas's face. Confusion, anger, and finally, determination. Constantine, he called. His advisor appeared in the doorway. Yes, Your Majesty? Prepare my horse and a small contingent of trusted guards. We ride for the northern tower immediately. As the group hastily prepared for departure, Vladislas found himself drawn to the palace gardens. The fog had begun to lift, revealing rows of white roses glistening with dew. Another memory surfaced, Ilinca's laughter as she taught him the names of flowers in her mother's tongue. Romanian mountain sage, he murmured, touching a delicate purple blossom. Tamayara. You remember, came a soft voice behind him. He turned to find Maria, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. Not everything, Vladislas admitted, but enough to know that a great injustice has been done. Tell me, Maria, how much do you know? The old woman sighed heavily. I know that 15 years ago this palace was filled with joy. You and Ilinca were to be married. She was the daughter of a lesser noble, but your love, it was the stuff of legends. Then came the night of the grand ball, much like last night. There was a commotion, and the next morning you couldn't remember her. Ilinca's family was gone, and she was relegated to the role of a servant. Vladislas's fists clenched at his sides. My mother, she orchestrated this. Maria nodded solemnly. For the good of the empire, she said. A commoner couldn't be empress. But the cost? She shook her head. The cost was too high. As the horses were brought around, Vladislas turned to Constantine. You knew. All this time you knew. Constantine bowed his head. Forgive me, Your Majesty. I was sworn to secrecy. We'll discuss your loyalty later, Vladislas said coldly. For now, we ride. It's time to reclaim what was stolen, not just from me, but from all of us. As the small party galloped towards the northern tower, the fog finally lifted, revealing a brilliant blue sky. Vladislas felt a surge of hope. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he knew one thing with certainty. He would fight for the love he had lost and the future that had been denied them. In the tower, Ilinca stood at the narrow window, her heart leaping at the sight of approaching riders. Somehow she knew Vladislas was coming for her. Their love, buried for so long, was finally breaking free. like a flower pushing through the last snows of winter, reaching for the sun. The hoofbeats of Vladislas's party echoed through the misty forest as they approached the northern tower. The emperor's heart raced, not from the exertion of the ride, but from the tumultuous emotions coursing through him. Memories, still fragmented but growing clearer, flashed before his eyes with each gallop of his steed. As they neared the tower, Constantine rode up beside him. "Your Majesty," he called over the thundering of hooves, "perhaps we should consider a more diplomatic approach." The Dowager Empress. Vladislas reined in his horse sharply, causing the entire party to halt. His eyes blazed with a fire that made even his most seasoned advisors take a step back. Diplomatic, Constantine? Was it diplomatic to erase 15 years of my life? To condemn an innocent woman to servitude? To rob me of... He faltered, the weight of his lost memories threatening to overwhelm him. "Sire," Constantine began cautiously, "I understand your anger, but there are political considerations." "Enough!" Vladislas roared, his voice echoing through the trees. "I am the Emperor, Constantine. It's time I started acting like one. No more manipulations, no more secrets. Today we right the wrongs of the past." As they approached the tower gates, they were met by a contingent of guards, their faces a mixture of confusion and apprehension at the sight of their emperor in such a state. "Open the gates," Vladislas commanded, his voice leaving no room for argument. The captain of the guard stepped forward, his hand resting nervously on the hilt of his sword. "Your Majesty, we have strict orders from the Dowager Empress." "And I am giving you new orders," Vladislas interrupted, his voice low and dangerous. "Open the gates now, or I'll have them torn down stone by stone." Inside the tower, Ilinca paced her small room like a caged animal. The sound of commotion below drew her to the window, and her heart leapt at the sight of Vladislas dismounting his horse. Even from this distance she could see the determination in his stance. The door to her room burst open and Katerina rushed in, her usually composed demeanor now frantic. "Come with me," she hissed, grabbing Ilinca's arm. "We must get you out of here before—" "Before what, Katerina?" Ilinca pulled her arm free, standing her ground. "Before the truth comes to light? Before the Emperor remembers who I am? Who we were to each other?" Katerina's eyes narrowed. "You fool. Do you think a few recovered memories can undo years of careful planning? The Empire needs stability, not some romantic fantasy." "And what of love?" Ilinca challenged, her voice rising. "What of justice? You and the Dowager Empress may have stolen our past, but you cannot control our future." A commotion in the hallway interrupted their heated exchange. The sound of hurried footsteps grew louder, and suddenly the door flew open once more. Vladislas stood in the doorway, his eyes immediately finding Ilinca's. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. The years of separation, the pain of forgotten love, the weight of secrets kept, all of it hung in the air between them. "Ilinca," Vladislas breathed, taking a step forward. "Vladislas," she responded, her voice barely above a whisper. The use of his given name, spoken with such intimacy, triggered another flood of memories. Suddenly, he saw flashes of their shared past, moonlit walks in the palace gardens, stolen kisses behind marble columns, whispered promises of eternal love. Katerina moved to stand between them, her voice sharp. "Your Majesty, this woman is nothing but a servant. Whatever you think you remember—" "Silence!" Vladislas commanded, his eyes never leaving Ilinca's. "I remember enough. I remember love." He crossed the room in 3 quick strides, taking Ilinca's hands in his. "Forgive me," he said softly, his voice thick with emotion. "Forgive me for forgetting, for the years lost, for every moment of pain you've endured." Ilinca's eyes filled with tears. "There's nothing to forgive. You were a victim too, my love." Their reunion was interrupted by the arrival of Constantine and Dr. Aldea, both out of breath from the climb up the tower stairs. "Your Majesty," Constantine began, his voice urgent, "we must discuss the implications of—" "The implications?" Vladislas turned, his arm still protectively around Ilinca. The implications of what, Constantine? Of righting a terrible wrong? Of reclaiming the life that was stolen from us? Dr. Aldea stepped forward, his hands raised in a placating gesture. Sire, please. Your mind is still fragile. The treatments I've administered over the years, suddenly stopping them could have unforeseen consequences. Vladislas's eyes flashed dangerously. Treatments? You mean the potions designed to keep me docile and forgetful? Tell me, doctor, was it your idea or my mother's to poison my mind all these years? Aldea blanched, taking a step back. Your Majesty, I was only following orders. The Dowager Empress insisted it was for the good of the Empire. And what of my good? Vladislas demanded. What of Ilinca's? What of the lives you've destroyed in the name of political expediency? Constantine, ever the diplomat, tried to salvage the situation. Sire, perhaps we should all return to the palace. We can discuss this matter calmly, away from prying eyes and ears. Ilinca, who had been silent during this exchange, finally spoke up. No more hiding, she said firmly. No more secrets. If we're to have any chance at a future, we must confront the past. All of it. Vladislas nodded, squeezing her hand. You're right, my love. It's time for the truth to come to light. He turned to Constantine. Send word to the palace. I want the court assembled immediately. It's time the people knew what has been done in their name. As they prepared to leave the tower, Katerina made one last desperate attempt. Your Majesty, please, think of the scandal, the potential unrest, a commoner as your consort. Vladislas fixed her with a steely gaze. Ilinca is more noble in her heart than many who wear that title. And as for unrest, he paused, looking around at the faces of those gathered, some fearful, some hopeful, all uncertain. Perhaps a little unrest is exactly what this empire needs, a chance to break free from the chains of the past and forge a new future. As they descended the tower stairs, Ilinca leaned close to Vladislas. Are you sure about this? Once we take this step, there's no going back. He stopped, turning to face her fully. In that moment, with sunlight streaming through a narrow window, illuminating her face, Vladislas felt the last pieces of his memory click into place. He saw not just the woman before him, but the girl she had been, the love they had shared, the future they had dreamed of. I've never been more certain of anything in my life, he said, cupping her face gently. We've lost 15 years, Ilinca. I won't lose another moment. With that, he kissed her, pouring 15 years of forgotten love into a single, passionate embrace. As they parted, both breathless, a sense of rightness settled over them. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The ride back to the palace was tense, the air heavy with unspoken words and looming confrontations. Vladislas and Ilinca rode side by side, their hands occasionally brushing, reaffirming their connection with each touch. As the palace came into view, its spires reaching towards the sky, Vladislas felt a mixture of determination and apprehension. He knew that what he was about to do would shake the very foundations of his reign, perhaps even of the empire itself. But as he glanced at Ilinca, saw the love and trust shining in her eyes, he knew it was worth any cost. Are you ready? He asked softly as they approached the palace gates. Ilinca took a deep breath, straightening her shoulders. I've been ready for 15 years, she replied, her voice steady. Together they rode through the gates, ready to reclaim their past and reshape their future. The court awaited, and with it, the promise of a new dawn for Romania, one built on truth, justice, and the enduring power of love. The grand hall of the palace buzzed with nervous energy as nobles and courtiers gathered, summoned by the emperor's unexpected decree. Whispers and speculations filled the air, a cacophony of confusion and anticipation. The ornate doors swung open, and a hush fell over the assembly as Emperor Vladislas strode in, Ilinca by his side. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd at the sight of a servant walking alongside their sovereign. Vladislas raised his hand, silencing the room with a single gesture. My loyal subjects, he began, his voice ringing clear and strong. I stand before you today to right a grave injustice that has plagued our empire for far too long. He took Ilinca's hand, raising it for all to see. This woman, whom many of you know as a servant, is in fact my betrothed, my one true love, cruelly torn from me 15 years ago by deception and treachery." The hall erupted in shocked exclamations. Lady Eleonora, a prominent noblewoman, stepped forward. "Your Majesty, surely you jest. This commoner, your betrothed? It's preposterous." Vladislas's eyes flashed dangerously. "Is it preposterous, Lady Eleonora, that love should transcend the arbitrary boundaries of class? Or is it more preposterous that for 15 years I have been drugged and manipulated, my memories stolen, all in the name of political expedience?" A deadly silence fell over the room. Constantine, sensing the growing tension, attempted to intervene. "Perhaps, Your Majesty, we should discuss this matter in private. The affairs of state—" "No more secrets, Constantine," Vladislas interrupted firmly. "No more shadows. It's time for the truth to come to light." He turned to address the court once more. "For years I have ruled as you expected, making decisions based on tradition and political maneuvering. But at what cost? The cost of my own happiness, of true love, of the very essence of who I am." Ilinca, who had been silent until now, spoke up, her voice clear and unwavering. "I know many of you look at me and see nothing but a servant, but I ask you to look deeper. See the woman who has loved your emperor faithfully for 15 years, even when he couldn't remember my name. See the daughter of a lesser noble whose family was destroyed for daring to reach above their station." Her words seemed to touch something in the crowd. Some faces softened while others remained skeptical. An elderly duke stepped forward, his wizened face creased with concern. "Your Majesty, even if what you say is true, think of the consequences. The alliances that might be threatened, the political balance upset." Vladislas nodded solemnly. "I have thought of little else, Duke Mircea. But I ask you this. What is the worth of an empire built on lies? What is the value of alliances forged through deception and manipulation?" He paused, looking around the room, meeting the eyes of his subjects. "I propose a new vision for Romania, one where merit outweighs birth, where love is not constrained by class, where truth and justice are the foundations of our society." A young baroness, her eyes shining with unshed tears, spoke up. "But Your Majesty, how can we be certain? How do we know this isn't some elaborate ruse?" Vladislas's expression softened. "A fair question, Baroness. Ilinca, would you show them?" Ilinca reached into the folds of her dress and produced the locket she had worn for 15 years. She opened it, revealing the miniature portrait of the young Vladislas. "This has been my most treasured possession," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "A reminder of the love we shared, even when all seemed lost." The locket was passed around, and murmurs of recognition spread through the crowd. Many remembered the young couple's love story, now that it was brought to the forefront of their minds. Suddenly, the doors burst open once more. The Dowager Empress swept in, her face a mask of cold fury. "What is the meaning of this farce?" she demanded, her voice cutting through the murmurs like a knife. Vladislas turned to face his mother, his stance resolute. "No farce, mother, only truth. The truth you've tried so hard to bury." The Dowager Empress's eyes darted between Vladislas and Ilinca, calculation replacing shock. "My son," she began, her voice honeyed with false concern. "You're unwell. These delusions. Dr. Aldea will—" "Enough!" Vladislas roared, causing even the most stoic courtiers to flinch. "No more lies, mother. No more manipulations. Tell them the truth. Tell them how you orchestrated this entire charade, how you drugged your own son, destroyed an innocent family, all to maintain your grip on power." The Dowager Empress's composure cracked just for a moment before she rallied. "Everything I did for the good of this empire. A commoner as Empress? It would have destabilized everything we've built." "And what have we built, mother?" Vladislas challenged. "An empire of secrets and lies, where love is sacrificed on the altar of political expediency." The tension in the room was palpable. Courtiers shifted uncomfortably, torn between long-held loyalties and the shocking revelations before them. Ilinca stepped forward, her voice gentle but firm. "Your Imperial Majesty," she addressed the Dowager Empress, "I understand your fears. Change is frightening. But look around you. See the world your son has built, even under the weight of your deception. Imagine what he could achieve, what Romania could become, if he were free to rule with his whole heart." The Dowager Empress faltered, her gaze sweeping across the faces in the room. She saw confusion, anger, but also hope. Hope for something new, something better. "You leave me no choice," she said finally, her voice heavy with resignation. She turned to address the court. "What my son says is true. 15 years ago, I orchestrated a plan to separate him from Ilinca, believing it was for the greater good of Romania." A collective gasp rippled through the assembly. The Dowager Empress continued, her shoulders sagging under the weight of her confession. "I see now. Perhaps I was wrong. Perhaps in my desire to protect our way of life, I lost sight of what truly matters." Vladislas approached his mother, his expression a complex mixture of anger, hurt, and a son's enduring love. "Thank you for your honesty, Mother. It's a start. But there is much to atone for, much to rebuild." He turned back to the court, his arm around Ilinca. "My people, I know this is a lot to process. I ask for your trust, your patience, as we navigate this new chapter in our history. Ilinca and I have lost 15 years, but we refuse to lose another day. We will be married, and she will rule by my side as your empress." The hall erupted in a cacophony of voices, some cheering, some protesting, all processing the monumental shift taking place before their eyes. Amidst the chaos, Ilinca leaned close to Vladislas. "Are you sure about this?" she whispered. "There's still time to—" Vladislas silenced her with a tender kiss, uncaring of the spectacle they made. As they parted, he smiled, a genuine, unguarded smile that took years off his face. "My love, we've had enough of hiding. This is our time, our chance to build the future we always dreamed of." As the sun began to set, painting the grand hall in hues of gold and crimson, a new era dawned for Romania. The road ahead would not be easy. There were wounds to heal, trust to rebuild, and a nation to unite. But as Vladislas and Ilinca stood hand in hand, facing their future together, hope blossomed in the hearts of many. The story of the emperor who defied tradition for love, who chose truth over comfort, began to spread beyond the palace walls. And in taverns and homes across Romania, people began to dream of a world where love truly could conquer all. The days following the dramatic revelation in the Grand Hall were a whirlwind of activity and emotion. The palace buzzed with a mixture of excitement and apprehension as news of the emperor's lost love and impending marriage spread throughout Romania. In his private study, Vladislas sat behind his ornate desk, poring over documents and decrees, determined to right the wrongs of the past 15 years. A soft knock at the door interrupted his concentration. "Enter," he called, looking up to see Ilinca step into the room, a vision in a simple yet elegant gown of deep blue. "You missed breakfast again," she chided gently, crossing the room to stand beside him. "You can't run an empire on an empty stomach, my love." Vladislas smiled, taking her hand and pressing a kiss to her palm. "How can I think of food when there's so much to be done? Look at this." He gestured to the papers strewn across his desk. "Families displaced, careers derailed, all because they were connected to you or your family. The web of deceit runs deeper than we imagined." Ilinca's face fell as she scanned the documents. "I had no idea. All these people, suffering because of me." "No," Vladislas said firmly, standing to face her. "They suffered because of the choices others made. But we have the power to make it right." He cupped her face gently, his eyes filled with determination. "Together we'll rebuild what was broken. We'll create a Romania where such injustices can never happen again." Their tender moment was interrupted by Constantine, who entered the study with a harried expression. "Your Majesty, forgive the intrusion, but there's a situation developing in the city." Vladislas straightened, immediately alert. "What kind of situation?" Constantine hesitated, his eyes darting to Ilinca before continuing. "There are protests, sire. A group of conservative nobles has rallied some of the populace. They're demanding that you reconsider your decision to marry Ilinca. Ilinca's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with concern. Vladislas, however, remained calm. What exactly are they saying, Constantine? Don't spare the details. The advisor shifted uncomfortably. They claim that a commoner as empress will weaken the monarchy, that it goes against centuries of tradition. Some are even suggesting that you're not of sound mind, that the Dowager Empress's confession was coerced. Vladislas's jaw clenched, but his voice remained steady. And what do you think, old friend? Do you believe I'm not of sound mind? Constantine met his emperor's gaze unflinchingly. I think, Your Majesty, that I have never seen you more clear-headed or determined, but I fear the consequences if this unrest is not addressed quickly. Ilinca, who had been listening intently, spoke up. Perhaps we should delay the wedding. Give people time to adjust to the idea. No, Vladislas said firmly, taking her hand. We've lost too much time already. We will not let fear dictate our actions any longer. He turned to Constantine. Arrange for me to address the people, not from the palace balcony, but in the main square. It's time they saw their emperor as a man, not just a figurehead. As Constantine hurried off to make the arrangements, Ilinca looked at Vladislas with a mixture of love and worry. Are you sure about this? It could be dangerous. Vladislas pulled her close, resting his forehead against hers. My love, the greatest danger would be to live in fear, to let others control our destiny. We've had enough of that. Hours later, the main square of Bucharest was packed with people, a sea of faces both curious and wary. The tension in the air was palpable as Vladislas and Ilinca made their way to the hastily constructed platform. As they climbed the steps, hand in hand, a hush fell over the crowd. Vladislas took a deep breath, surveying the faces before him. He saw hope, fear, anger, and confusion, but most of all he saw his people, the very soul of Romania, looking to him for guidance. My fellow Romanians, he began, his voice strong and clear. I stand before you today not just as your emperor, but as a man who has been given a second chance at love and life. For 15 years, I ruled with only half my heart, half my soul. The other half was locked away, a victim of manipulation and deceit. He gestured to Ilinca, who stood tall beside him. This woman, whom some would dismiss as a mere servant, is the key to unlocking the truth of who I am, of who we can be as a nation. Yes, she was born to a lesser noble family. Yes, she has served in the palace, but her nobility comes not from her birth, but from her actions, her unwavering love and loyalty in the face of impossible odds. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Vladislas continued, his passion evident in every word. I know that change can be frightening. I know that tradition has its place. But I ask you this. What is the value of a tradition that denies love? What is the worth of a system that would destroy families and erase memories to maintain the status quo? He paused, letting his words sink in. I dream of a Romania where every person, regardless of their birth, has the opportunity to rise based on their merits, where love is celebrated, not feared, where truth and justice are the foundations of our society. From the crowd, a voice called out, But Your Majesty, how can we trust that this isn't some sort of trick? How do we know you haven't been bewitched or coerced? Vladislas's eyes found the speaker, a middle-aged man with a worried frown. A fair question, my friend. Let me ask you this. Have you ever been in love? Truly, deeply in love? The man nodded, a bit taken aback. And if someone tried to take that love away from you, to make you forget it ever existed, how would you feel when you finally remembered? Understanding dawned on the man's face, and he nodded slowly. Ilinca stepped forward, her voice clear and steady. People of Romania, I know you have no reason to trust me. I have been a shadow in the palace for 15 years, watching and waiting. But my love for your emperor, for this country, has never wavered. I stand before you not asking for your crown, but for your understanding, for a chance to prove that love, when pure and true, can only make our nation stronger. Her words seemed to touch something in the crowd. Faces softened, and here and there smiles began to appear. An elderly woman pushed her way to the front, her eyes bright with unshed tears. I remember, she called out, her voice quavering with age but filled with conviction. I remember the young prince and his beautiful betrothed, how they danced at the midsummer festival, how their love lit up the entire city. I thought I had dreamed it, but now I see. Now I remember the truth. Her words sparked a chain reaction. Others in the crowd began to nod, to murmur their own half-forgotten memories of the young couple's love story. Vladislas, moved by the outpouring of support, raised his hands. My people, I make you this vow. Ilinca and I will dedicate our lives to serving Romania, to creating a future bright enough to outshine the shadows of the past. We ask for your trust, your support, as we embark on this new chapter together. As if on cue, the sun broke through the clouds, bathing the square in golden light. Vladislas turned to Ilinca, dropping to one knee before her and the assembled crowd. Ilinca, he said, his voice thick with emotion, 15 years ago we were torn apart. But love, true love, found a way to bring us back together. Will you do me the honor of becoming my wife, my empress, my partner in all things? Ilinca's eyes shone with tears of joy as she nodded, unable to speak. As Vladislas rose and kissed her, the crowd erupted in cheers. It was a moment of pure magic, a turning point not just for two long-lost lovers, but for an entire nation. As the sun set on that momentous day, casting long shadows across the square, hope blossomed in the hearts of many. The story of the emperor and his long-lost love began to spread like wildfire across Romania, igniting imaginations and challenging long-held beliefs about class, tradition, and the power of love. In taverns and homes, in fields and factories, people began to dream of a new Romania, one where love could conquer all, where the past could be healed, and where the future held endless possibilities. The road ahead would not be easy, but as Vladislas and Ilinca stood hand in hand, facing their people and their future, they knew that together they could overcome any obstacle. The winds of change were blowing through Romania, carrying with them the promise of a brighter tomorrow. As dawn broke over Bucharest, casting a rosy glow across the city, the palace was already a hive of activity. In her chambers, Ilinca stood before a full-length mirror, barely recognizing the woman who stared back at her. Gone were the simple servant's clothes she had worn for 15 years. In their place was a gown of ivory silk embroidered with gold thread in intricate Romanian patterns. Maria, the old housekeeper who had been her confidant for so long, fussed with the train of the dress. "You look like an angel, child," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Who would have thought after all these years?" Ilinca turned, taking the older woman's hands in hers. "I couldn't have survived without you, Maria. Your kindness, your discretion. You kept hope alive when all seemed lost." A knock at the door interrupted their moment. Constantine entered, his usual stoic expression softened by a hint of a smile. "It's time, my lady. The emperor awaits you in the chapel." As Ilinca made her way through the palace corridors, she couldn't help but marvel at how different everything looked. The same halls she had scrubbed and polished for years now seemed to shimmer with possibility. Courtiers bowed as she passed, their faces a mixture of awe and lingering uncertainty. At the chapel doors she paused, taking a deep breath. This was it, the moment that would change everything. As the doors swung open and the first notes of the wedding march filled the air, Ilinca felt a surge of love and determination. She stepped forward, her eyes finding Vladislas at the altar. The ceremony was a blur of emotion and ritual. As they exchanged vows, Vladislas's voice rang out clear and strong. "Ilinca, my love, my heart, 15 years ago, forces beyond our control tore us apart. But love, true love, found a way to bring us back together. I vow to spend every day of the rest of our lives making up for the time we lost, to cherish you, to honor you, and to build a future for Romania that reflects the strength and purity of our love." Ilinca's eyes shimmered with unshed tears as she responded, "Vladislas, my emperor, my soulmate. Through years of darkness, the memory of our love was the light that kept me going. I vow to stand by your side, in times of joy and in times of challenge, to be your partner in all things, and to help create a Romania where love knows no boundaries." As they sealed their vows with a kiss, the chapel erupted in applause. Even those who had been skeptical couldn't deny the palpable love between the emperor and his new empress. The celebration that followed was unlike anything Romania had ever seen. The palace gates were thrown open, and people from all walks of life poured in to share in the joy of the royal couple. In the grand ballroom, nobles danced alongside commoners, their shared happiness bridging age-old class divides. As the night wore on, Vladislas and Ilinca found a moment of quiet on a secluded balcony overlooking the city. "Can you believe it?" Ilinca whispered, leaning into her husband's embrace. "After everything we've been through, we're finally here." Vladislas kissed her temple softly. "It feels like a dream, but if it is, I never want to wake up." Their peaceful moment was interrupted by Constantine, who approached with a concerned expression. "Your Majesties, forgive the intrusion, but there's a situation that requires your attention." Vladislas straightened, instantly alert. "What is it, Constantine?" The advisor hesitated, his eyes darting between the newlyweds. It's the Dowager Empress, sire. She's demanding to see you both. She claims to have information that could threaten the stability of your reign." Ilinca felt a chill run down her spine. What could she possibly have to say now? Hasn't she done enough damage? Vladislas took her hand, squeezing it reassuringly. "Whatever it is, we'll face it together. Constantine, tell my mother we'll meet her in my study in 10 minutes. As they made their way through the crowded ballroom, whispers and curious glances followed in their wake. The joy of the celebration was tinged with an undercurrent of tension, as courtiers sensed that something was amiss. In the emperor's study, the Dowager Empress waited, her regal bearing at odds with the defeated slump of her shoulders. As Vladislas and Ilinca entered, she rose, her eyes filled with a mixture of regret and determination. "Mother," Vladislas began, his voice carefully neutral, "what is so urgent that it couldn't wait until after our wedding night?" The Dowager Empress took a deep breath. "My son, my daughter," she said, including Ilinca in her address for the first time. "What I have to tell you may change everything. But first I owe you both an apology. My actions, though I believed them to be for the good of Romania, were misguided and cruel. I see that now." Ilinca, surprised by this show of humility, stepped forward. "Your Imperial Majesty, we appreciate your words. But what information could be so important?" The older woman's hands trembled slightly as she produced a sealed document from her robes. This is a letter from your father, Ilinca, written on his deathbed. I've kept it hidden all these years, believing it was for the best. But now I see. The truth must come to light, no matter the cost." Vladislas took the letter, breaking the seal with trembling fingers. As he read, his face paled. This can't be true. Mother, is this authentic?" The Dowager Empress nodded solemnly. "I'm afraid so, my son. Ilinca is not just the daughter of a lesser noble. She is the last surviving member of the Draculaist line, a direct descendant of Vlad the Impaler himself." Ilinca gasped, her mind reeling. But how? My family. We were never—" "Your father kept it a secret to protect you," the Dowager Empress explained. "The Draculaist line was thought to be extinct, and there were those who would have gone to great lengths to ensure it stayed that way. He revealed the truth to me only when he knew death was near, hoping I would protect you." Vladislas turned to Ilinca, his eyes wide with wonder. "Do you understand what this means, my love? Your claim to the throne is as strong as mine. Our union, it doesn't just heal old wounds, it unites two of the most powerful bloodlines in Romanian history." Ilinca shook her head, overwhelmed. I don't know how to process this. All these years thinking I was reaching above my station, and now—" The Dowager Empress stepped forward, taking Ilinca's hands in hers. "My dear, I know I have no right to ask for your forgiveness, but please believe me when I say that I am truly sorry for the pain I've caused. I thought I was protecting the empire, but in my blindness, I nearly destroyed its greatest hope for the future." Tears welled in Ilinca's eyes as she looked at the woman who had caused her so much suffering. But in that moment, she saw not an empress or a manipulator, but a mother who had made terrible mistakes out of misguided love for her son and her country. "It will take time," Ilinca said softly, "but I believe that forgiveness is possible. For the sake of Romania, for the sake of the future we're trying to build, we must find a way to move forward." Vladislas wrapped an arm around his wife, his voice filled with emotion. "You continue to amaze me with your capacity for love and forgiveness, my dear. Truly, Romania could ask for no better empress." As the weight of this new revelation settled over them, Constantine cleared his throat. "Your Majesties, the guests will be wondering where you've gone. What shall I tell them?" Vladislas and Ilinca exchanged a look, a silent conversation passing between them. Finally, Vladislas spoke. Tell them that a new chapter in Romania's history has begun, one that honors our past while embracing a future filled with hope and unity." As they prepared to rejoin the celebration, now armed with knowledge that would change the course of their reign, Ilinca paused. "Vladislas," she said softly, "no matter what my bloodline may be, know that my love for you and for Romania comes not from any royal heritage, but from the depths of my heart." Vladislas kissed her tenderly. "And that, my love, is why you will be the greatest empress Romania has ever known." Hand in hand, they walked back into the ballroom, ready to face whatever challenges the future might hold. As the music swelled and they took to the dance floor, the gathered crowd cheered. In that moment, watching their emperor and empress move in perfect harmony, the people of Romania felt a surge of hope. A new era had dawned, one where love conquered all, where ancient bloodlines merged with new ideals, and where the wounds of the past could finally begin to heal. The weeks following the royal wedding were a whirlwind of activity and change. The news of Ilinca's true heritage spread like wildfire throughout Romania, igniting both excitement and controversy. In the grand study of the palace, Vladislas and Ilinca sat side by side, poring over stacks of documents and petitions. "Another request for an audience," Vladislas sighed, pushing a letter across the desk. "This time from the Duke of Transylvania. It seems everyone wants to curry favor with the newly revealed Draculaist heir." Ilinca picked up the letter, her brow furrowing. "I still can't believe it myself. All these years, thinking I was just a minor noble's daughter, and now—" She trailed off, shaking her head in disbelief. Vladislas took her hand, squeezing it gently. "You are so much more than your bloodline, my love. Draculaist or not, you are the woman who captured my heart and the hearts of our people." A knock at the door interrupted their moment. Constantine entered, looking harried. "Your Majesties, I apologize for the intrusion, but there's a situation developing in the city." Vladislas straightened, immediately alert. "What kind of situation, Constantine?" The advisor hesitated, his eyes darting between the emperor and empress. There's a group gathering in the main square. They're calling themselves the True Romanians. They're demanding proof of the empress's heritage and questioning the legitimacy of your union." Ilinca's face paled. "After everything we've been through, after all the truth that's come to light, there are still those who doubt us?" Vladislas stood, his jaw set in determination. "Then we shall give them their proof. Constantine, arrange for us to address the crowd. It's time to put these doubts to rest once and for all." As they made their way to the palace balcony overlooking the main square, Ilinca's hand trembled in Vladislas's. "Are you sure about this?" she whispered. "What if they reject me? What if—" Vladislas stopped, turning to face her fully. "My love, you are the strongest person I know. You survived 15 years of hardship and heartache, never losing faith in our love. You have nothing to fear from these people. They just need to see the Ilinca I see. Brave, compassionate, and every inch a queen." Ilinca took a deep breath, squaring her shoulders. "You're right. We've come too far to let fear hold us back now." As they stepped onto the balcony, a hush fell over the crowd below. Faces turned upward, a sea of expressions ranging from curiosity to outright hostility. Vladislas raised his hands, his voice ringing out clear and strong. "People of Romania," he began, "I stand before you today with my empress, my wife, my partner in all things. We have heard your concerns, your doubts about the legitimacy of our union and Ilinca's heritage." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Vladislas continued, his voice gaining strength. For too long, secrets and lies have plagued our great nation. No more. Today we lay bare the truth, not just of Ilinca's bloodline, but of the love that has sustained us through years of separation and hardship. He gestured for Ilinca to step forward. She did so, her head held high, her voice clear as she addressed her people. I know many of you look at me and still see the servant girl who worked in the palace. I don't deny that past. It shaped me, taught me the value of hard work and humility. But I'm also the last surviving member of the Dragomir line, a truth hidden to protect me from those who would seek to exploit or harm me. From the crowd, a voice called out, "Prove it! How do we know this isn't some elaborate hoax?" Vladislas's eyes flashed, but Ilinca laid a calming hand on his arm. "A fair question," she said, her voice carrying across the square. "I could show you documents, present witnesses, but would that truly satisfy you? Instead, I offer you this. Look into my eyes, listen to my words, and see the love I have for this country and its people. Royal blood may flow through my veins, but it is my actions that will prove my worth as your empress." An elderly woman pushed her way to the front of the crowd, her wizened face creased with emotion. "I remember," she called out, her voice quavering but strong. "I remember the day your father brought you to the palace as a child. You had his eyes, the Dragomir eyes. I thought I was imagining things, but now I see the truth." Her words sparked a chain reaction. Others in the crowd began to nod, to murmur half-forgotten memories and stories passed down through generations. Vladislas seized the moment, his voice ringing with passion. "My people, for too long we have been bound by the chains of the past, by outdated traditions and fear of change. Ilinca's revelation offers us a chance not just to unite two great bloodlines, but to forge a new path for Romania. A path where merit outweighs birth, where love conquers prejudice, where the wounds of the past can finally begin to heal." As he spoke, Ilinca felt a surge of emotion. This was the man she had fallen in love with all those years ago, passionate, visionary, unafraid to challenge the status quo. She stepped forward, taking his hand. "We stand before you not just as your emperor and empress," she said, her voice strong and clear, "but as two people who have overcome impossible odds to be together. Our love story is Romania's story, one of perseverance, of hope in the face of adversity, of the triumph of truth over deception." A young man in the crowd, his face etched with uncertainty, called out, "But what does this mean for us? How will things change?" Vladislas smiled, his eyes alight with vision. "It means a new dawn for Romania. We will embark on reforms that will open doors of opportunity for all our citizens, regardless of their birth. We will invest in education, in infrastructure, in the arts. We will build a Romania that honors its rich history while embracing a future full of possibility." Ilinca added, her voice filled with warmth, "And we will do it together, not just Vladislas and I, but all of us. Every Romanian has a part to play in shaping our nation's future." As they spoke, the mood in the square began to shift. Faces that had been skeptical now showed glimmers of hope. Even those who had come to protest found themselves moved by the sincerity and passion of their rulers. An old man, his back bent with age but his eyes bright with wisdom, stepped forward. "I have lived through many changes in our beloved Romania," he said, his voice carrying surprisingly far. "I have seen good times and bad, but never have I seen a love like this, a love that could heal old wounds and unite a nation. If this is the future of Romania, then I, for one, embrace it wholeheartedly." His words seemed to break a dam. Cheers erupted from the crowd, growing in volume until they echoed off the buildings surrounding the square. People embraced each other, tears of joy and hope streaming down many faces. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the scene, Vladislas turned to Ilinca. "You were magnificent," he said softly, his eyes shining with pride and love. Ilinca smiled, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders. "We were magnificent," she corrected gently. "Together, just as we've always been meant to be." They turned back to the crowd, waving as the cheers continued to wash over them. In that moment, both Vladislas and Ilinca knew that while challenges still lay ahead, they had taken a crucial step towards healing the rifts in their nation. As they retreated into the palace, hand in hand, the sounds of celebration continued to fill the air. The story of the emperor and his long-lost love, now revealed to be a union of two great dynasties, began to spread across Romania and beyond. It was a tale of love triumphing over adversity, of truth emerging from the shadows of the past, and of a nation poised on the brink of a new, hopeful era. In homes and taverns across the land, people raised their glasses in toast to their emperor and empress, to love that defied the odds, and to the promise of a brighter future for all of Romania. The warm glow of candlelight flickered across the walls of the imperial bedchamber as Vladislas and Ilinca prepared for bed. The excitement of the day's events still lingered in the air, a palpable energy that seemed to hum through the palace walls. Ilinca sat at her dressing table, slowly removing the elaborate pins from her hair. "I still can't believe how well it went," she mused, meeting Vladislas's eyes in the mirror. "For a moment there, I thought we might have a riot on our hands." Vladislas moved behind her, gently taking over the task of unraveling her intricate hairstyle. "I never doubted you for a second, my love. Your strength, your grace. You were born for this role, Dracula's blood or not." She leaned into his touch, closing her eyes. "It's all so overwhelming. Sometimes I wake up and think I'm still that servant girl, dreaming of a life she can never have." Vladislas knelt beside her, taking her hands in his. "This is no dream, Ilinca. This is our reality, hard-won and precious. And I swear to you, I will spend every day of our lives ensuring you never doubt your place by my side again." A knock at the door interrupted their intimate moment. Constantine entered, looking apologetic. "Forgive me, your majesties, but there's an urgent matter that requires your attention." Vladislas sighed, rising to his feet. "What is it now, Constantine? Surely the reforms can wait until morning." The advisor shook his head, his expression grave. "I'm afraid not, sire. We've received word from the border. There's been an incursion from the Ottoman Empire." Ilinca gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "An invasion? But we've had peace for years." Constantine hesitated, his eyes darting between the emperor and empress. "Not a full-scale invasion, your majesty, more of a probing action. It seems they're testing our defenses, perhaps emboldened by the recent upheaval in our court." Vladislas's jaw clenched, his eyes flashing with determination. "They think us weak, divided. We'll show them how wrong they are." He turned to Ilinca, his voice softening. "I'm sorry, my love. It seems our work is never done." Ilinca stood, squaring her shoulders. "Then we face it together, as we've faced everything else. What do you need me to do?" For the next several hours, the imperial couple worked tirelessly in the war room, poring over maps and dispatches, conferring with military advisors, and drafting urgent messages to their allies. As dawn broke, casting a pale light through the windows, Vladislas leaned back in his chair, rubbing his tired eyes. "We've done all we can for now," he said, his voice heavy with fatigue. "The reinforcements have been dispatched, and our diplomats are working to de-escalate the situation." Ilinca nodded, stifling a yawn. "Do you think it will be enough? What if this is just the beginning?" Vladislas reached across the table, taking her hand. "Then we'll face it, my love, together, as we've always done." Their moment of respite was short-lived. A commotion in the hallway drew their attention, and moments later, the doors burst open. Maria, the old housekeeper, rushed in, her face pale with worry. "Your Majesties," she panted, "forgive the intrusion, but there's a situation in the city. A group of protesters. They're saying the Ottoman incursion is a sign that the old ways were better. They're calling for the Dowager Empress to be reinstated as regent." Vladislas stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "What? After everything that's happened? After all the truth that's come to light?" Ilinca placed a calming hand on his arm. "My love, fear makes people do strange things. They're grasping for the familiar in the face of uncertainty." He turned to her, his eyes softening. "How do you do that? How do you remain so compassionate even now?" She smiled sadly. 15 years of servitude teaches one a great deal about human nature. We must address this, Vladislas. We can't let fear and misinformation undo all we've accomplished. Nodding in agreement, Vladislas turned to Constantine. Arrange for us to address the people again, not from the balcony this time. We'll go to them, meet them face to face in the square. As they made their way through the palace corridors, Ilinca couldn't help but marvel at how different everything looked in the harsh light of morning. The guilt and grandeur seemed less impressive now, overshadowed by the weight of the challenges they faced. In the courtyard, they were met by a small contingent of guards. The captain, a grizzled veteran named Dragomir, stepped forward. "Your Majesties, are you certain about this? The crowd is unpredictable. We can't guarantee your safety." Vladislas straightened, his voice firm. "Our safety is not the priority, Captain. The well-being of our people, the future of Romania, that is what matters now." As they approached the main square, the sound of angry voices grew louder. Rounding the corner, they were met with a sea of faces, many contorted with fear and anger. At the center of the crowd stood a familiar figure, the Dowager Empress herself. Ilinca felt Vladislas stiffen beside her. "Mother," he said, his voice carrying across the square, "what is the meaning of this?" The Dowager Empress turned, her face a mask of practiced concern. "My son, my daughter," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "I'm merely trying to calm the fears of our people. These are uncertain times, and they look to their leaders for stability." A man in the crowd called out, "The Ottoman threat is real. We need strong leadership, not romance and fairy tales." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the gathering. Vladislas stepped forward, his voice strong and clear. "My people, I understand your fears. The threat at our borders is indeed real. But do not think for a moment that love makes us weak. On the contrary, it gives us strength beyond measure." Ilinca moved to stand beside him, her voice joining his. "We have faced adversity before, and we will face it again. But we will do so united, not divided. The old ways may seem comforting in times of trouble, but they are not the answer." The Dowager Empress scoffed, her mask of concern slipping. "Pretty words, but words don't defend borders or fill empty bellies. The people need action, not speeches." Vladislas's eyes flashed. "And action they shall have, Mother. Even as we speak, our troops are mobilizing to defend our lands. Our diplomats are working tirelessly to maintain peace. But more than that, we are laying the groundwork for a Romania that is stronger, more unified than ever before." He turned, addressing the crowd directly. "I know change is frightening. I know the comfort of the familiar is tempting. But I ask you to look beyond your fears, to see the future we can build together. A Romania where every citizen has a voice, where opportunity is not determined by birth but by merit." Ilinca stepped forward, her voice clear and strong. "I stand before you not just as your empress, but as someone who has lived among you, worked alongside you. I know your struggles, your fears, your hopes, and I swear to you, we will not rest until every Romanian can sleep soundly, knowing their future is secure." A hush fell over the crowd as her words sank in. Then, from the back, a voice called out, "But what of the Ottoman threat? How can we be sure you're strong enough to protect us?" Vladislas smiled, a glint of steel in his eyes. "Strength comes in many forms, my friend. Yes, we have soldiers and weapons, but our true strength lies in our unity, in the love we have for our country and for each other. The Ottomans may test our borders, but they will find no weakness here, only a nation united, ready to defend what is ours." As he spoke, Ilinca could see the mood of the crowd beginning to shift. Faces that had been twisted with anger now showed glimmers of hope. Even the Dowager Empress seemed taken aback by the force of their words. An elderly woman pushed her way to the front, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "I remember," she said, her voice quavering but strong. "I remember when our land was torn by strife, when neighbor turned against neighbor. But I also remember the day young Prince Vladislas first rode through these streets, how his kindness and vision gave us hope. And now, seeing him stand here with his empress, I feel that hope again." Her words seemed to break a spell. All around the square, people began to nod, to smile, to reach out to their neighbors. The anger and fear that had brought them together began to dissipate, replaced by a cautious optimism. Vladislas turned to Ilinca, his eyes shining with love and pride. "We did it," he whispered. "Together." She squeezed his hand, her heart full. "Together," she agreed, "as it always should be." As the sun climbed higher in the sky, casting its warm light over the gathered crowd, a new day dawned for Romania. There were still challenges to face, borders to defend, reforms to implement. But in that moment, standing hand in hand before their people, Vladislas and Ilinca knew that they had taken a crucial step towards a brighter future. The Dowager Empress, seeing the tide turn, slipped away quietly. Her time had passed, and she knew it. The future belonged to the young couple who had defied tradition, overcome adversity, and united a nation through the power of their love. As Vladislas and Ilinca made their way back to the palace, surrounded by cheering citizens, they knew that their work was far from over. But with each other by their side, and the support of their people behind them, they were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The dawn of a new era had truly begun for Romania. The weeks following the confrontation in the square were a whirlwind of activity. Vladislas and Ilinca worked tirelessly, implementing reforms, strengthening defenses, and fostering unity among their people. The Ottoman threat loomed on the horizon, but with each passing day, Romania grew stronger and more united. One crisp autumn morning, Vladislas stood at the window of his study, watching the sun rise over Bucharest. Ilinca entered quietly, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "You're up early, my love," she said softly. "Trouble sleeping?" He turned, drawing her into his embrace. "Just thinking about how far we've come and how far we still have to go." Ilinca nodded, understanding in her eyes. "The trade negotiations with the Austrians?" "Among other things," Vladislas sighed. "We need this alliance, Ilinca. With the Ottomans pressing at our borders, we can't afford to stand alone." A knock at the door interrupted their moment. Constantine entered, looking more harried than usual. "Your Majesties, forgive the intrusion. The Austrian delegation has arrived early. They're waiting in the Grand Hall." Vladislas straightened, his face set with determination. "Very well, let's not keep them waiting." As they made their way to the Grand Hall, Ilinca squeezed her husband's hand. "Remember, my love, we negotiate from a position of strength. Romania is not the same nation it was a few months ago." Vladislas smiled, drawing strength from her words. "You're right, as always. What would I do without you?" The Grand Hall buzzed with tension as they entered. The Austrian delegation, led by a stern-faced man with a neatly trimmed beard, stood as one. Vladislas stepped forward, extending his hand. "Ambassador Müller, welcome to Romania. We're honored by your presence." The ambassador bowed stiffly. "Your Majesty, we've heard much about the changes in your court. I trust they won't affect our negotiations." Ilinca stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. "On the contrary, Ambassador, the changes in our court have only strengthened Romania's position. We look forward to forging a mutually beneficial alliance." For hours they negotiated. Trade agreements, military cooperation, cultural exchanges, all were discussed in painstaking detail. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the hall, a tentative agreement was reached. Ambassador Müller leaned back in his chair, a grudging respect in his eyes. "I must admit, Your Majesties, I came here expecting to find a weakened nation, ripe for exploitation. Instead, I find a Romania more united and determined than ever." Vladislas smiled, exchanging a glance with Ilinca. "Love has a way of bringing out the best in people, Ambassador, and in nations." As the Austrian delegation departed, promising to return in a week to finalize the treaty, Vladislas and Ilinca retreated to their private chambers. Exhausted but elated, they collapsed onto a plush sofa. "We did it," Ilinca breathed, her eyes shining. "A fair treaty, on our terms. Who would have thought it possible a few months ago?" Vladislas pulled her close, kissing her forehead. "With you by my side, my love, anything is possible." Their moment of peace was short-lived. A frantic knocking at the door jolted them from their reverie. Maria burst in, her face pale with worry. "Your Majesties, forgive me, but there's been an incident at the border. The Ottomans, They've launched an attack. Vladislas leapt to his feet, all traces of fatigue vanishing. Gather the war council immediately. We need to respond swiftly. As they hurried to the war room, Ilinca's mind raced. Do you think the Ottomans knew about our negotiations with the Austrians? Could this be an attempt to derail the alliance? Vladislas's jaw clenched. It's possible, but whatever their reasons, they'll soon learn that Romania is not to be trifled with. The war room was a hive of activity when they arrived. Maps were spread across tables, advisors huddled in tense discussion. General Popescu, a grizzled veteran of many campaigns, stepped forward to brief them. Your Majesties, the Ottomans have launched a multi-pronged assault along our southern border. They've breached our defenses in several places, but our troops are holding the line for now. Vladislas studied the map intently. What are our options, General? We can mount a counteroffensive here and here. Popescu pointed to 2 locations on the map, but it will leave our central defenses weakened. Ilinca leaned in, her brow furrowed in concentration. What if we didn't counterattack immediately? What if we drew them in, let them think they're winning, and then spring the trap? Vladislas finished, a glimmer of excitement in his eyes. Ilinca, that's brilliant. For the next several hours, they refined the plan. Messengers were dispatched, troops repositioned. As dawn broke, Vladislas and Ilinca stood on the palace balcony, watching the sun rise over their beloved Bucharest. Do you think it will work? Ilinca asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Vladislas took her hand, squeezing it gently. It has to. The fate of Romania hangs in the balance. Days passed in a blur of tension and sleepless nights. Reports from the front were mixed. Territory lost, then regained, costly victories and near defeats. But slowly, surely, the tide began to turn. On the 7th day of fighting, as Vladislas and Ilinca pored over the latest dispatches, Constantine burst into the war room, his face alight with excitement. Your Majesties, we've done it! The Ottoman forces are in full retreat. A cheer went up from the assembled advisors. Vladislas swept Ilinca into his arms, spinning her around in joy. We did it, my love. We saved Romania. As the celebrations began in earnest, Ilinca pulled Vladislas aside. There's something I need to tell you, she said, her voice trembling with emotion. Something I've suspected for a few days now, but I wanted to be sure. Vladislas's heart raced. What is it, Ilinca? Is everything all right? She took his hand, placing it gently on her stomach. We're going to have a baby, Vladislas. A heir to unite the Dragomir and Draculesht lines. For a moment, Vladislas stood frozen, overwhelmed by emotion. Then, with a cry of pure joy, he lifted Ilinca into his arms, spinning her around once more. A baby, he whispered, tears of happiness streaming down his face. Oh, my love, this is the greatest victory of all. As word spread through the palace and then through the city, the celebrations took on a new fervor. The people of Romania rejoiced not just for their military triumph, but for the promise of a new generation, a symbol of hope for the future. That night, as Bucharest glowed with bonfires and echoed with songs of victory, Vladislas and Ilinca stood once more on their balcony. The city spread out before them, alive with joy and possibility. Look at them, Ilinca said softly, her hand resting on her still flat stomach. All those people, celebrating, full of hope. Did you ever imagine we'd come this far? Vladislas pulled her close, his voice thick with emotion. In my wildest dreams, my love, in my wildest dreams. As they stood there, bathed in moonlight and the warm glow of victory, both knew that this was just the beginning. There would be challenges ahead, a country to rebuild, a child to raise, a legacy to forge. But with their love as the foundation and the support of their people behind them, Vladislas and Ilinca were ready to face whatever the future might bring. The story of the servant girl who became an empress, of the love that defied all odds and united a nation, would be told for generations to come. And as the first stars appeared in the night sky, Vladislas and Ilinca made a silent vow to honor that legacy, to nurture their love, and to build a Romania worthy of the faith their people had placed in them. The future, bright with promise, stretched out before them, a future they would face together, hand in hand, heart to heart. The months following the Ottoman retreat were a time of great change and anticipation in Romania. As winter settled over the land, blanketing Bucharest in a pristine layer of snow, the palace buzzed with excitement. The news of Ilinca's pregnancy had spread throughout the kingdom, bringing with it a renewed sense of hope and unity. One crisp morning, Vladislas stood at the window of their private chambers, watching the snowflakes dance in the pale winter light. Ilinca approached, her hand resting gently on her now visible bump. "What are you thinking about, my love?" she asked softly, joining him at the window. Vladislas turned, his eyes filled with wonder as he placed his hand over hers. "About how much has changed in such a short time. A year ago I was a shell of a man, ruling without truly living. And now—" He trailed off, overcome with emotion. Ilinca leaned into him, her voice warm with affection. "And now we're building a future together, for our child and for Romania." Their peaceful moment was interrupted by a knock at the door. Constantine entered, his face a mixture of excitement and apprehension. "Your Majesties, forgive the intrusion, but there's news from the borders." Vladislas straightened, immediately alert. "What is it, Constantine? Have the Ottomans returned?" The advisor shook his head. "No, sire, it's delegates from Wallachia and Moldavia. They're requesting an audience. They speak of unification." Ilinca gasped, her eyes wide. "Unification? But that's been nothing but a dream for centuries." Vladislas paced the room, his mind racing. The defeat of the Ottomans must have emboldened them. But unification, it would change everything. "Isn't that what we've been working towards?" Ilinca asked, her voice filled with cautious hope. "A stronger, more united Romania?" Vladislas nodded slowly. "Yes, but the logistics, the potential conflicts, it won't be easy." Constantine cleared his throat. "The delegates await your response, Your Majesties. Shall I show them in?" Vladislas exchanged a look with Ilinca, seeing his own determination reflected in her eyes. "Yes," he said firmly. "Let's hear what they have to say." The grand meeting hall was filled with tension as the delegates from Wallachia and Moldavia were ushered in. Vladislas and Ilinca sat side by side on their thrones, presenting a united front. The Wallachian delegate, a stern-faced man named Radu, stepped forward. "Your Majesties," he began, his voice carrying across the hall, "we come before you today with a proposal that could change the course of history for all our people." Mircea, the Moldavian representative, joined him. "For too long our lands have been divided, easy prey for foreign powers. But your victory against the Ottomans has shown us what is possible when we stand together." Vladislas leaned forward, his interest piqued. "And what exactly are you proposing, gentlemen?" Radu took a deep breath before continuing. "We propose a full unification of Wallachia, Moldavia, and Transylvania under the Romanian crown. One nation, strong and united, able to stand against any threat." A murmur ran through the assembled courtiers. Ilinca spoke up, her voice calm but firm. Such a unification would be unprecedented. There would be many challenges to overcome. Mircea nodded, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. "We are aware, Your Majesty. But we believe that under your leadership, with the strength and vision you've shown, it can be done." Vladislas stood, pacing before the thrones. "The implications of this are enormous. Laws would need to be rewritten, governments restructured. And what of the nobles who might lose power in such a unification?" Radu stepped forward, his voice passionate. "Some will resist, it's true. But many see the wisdom in this path. United, we could become a power to rival any in Europe." As the discussion continued, delving into the intricacies of governance and diplomacy, Ilinca watched her husband closely. She saw the fire in his eyes, the vision of a greater Romania taking shape in his mind. Finally, after hours of debate and negotiation, Vladislas raised his hand for silence. "Gentlemen, your proposal is bold, perhaps even revolutionary. It will not be an easy path, but—" He paused, looking to Ilinca, who nodded encouragingly. "But it is a path worth taking. Let us begin the work of unification. The hall erupted in cheers and applause. As the delegates rushed forward to shake hands and make plans, Ilinca approached Vladislas, taking his hand. "Are you sure about this?" she asked softly. "It will mean more work, more challenges." Vladislas smiled, squeezing her hand. "I'm sure. This is the Romania we've dreamed of, Ilinca. A nation strong enough to protect its people, progressive enough to offer opportunity to all." As the excitement of the day wore on, Vladislas and Ilinca retreated to their private garden for a moment of peace. The snow-covered roses glittered in the fading light, a reminder of the beauty that could flourish even in the harshest conditions. "Do you remember," Ilinca said softly, "when you taught me the names of these flowers? It was right here, before everything changed." Vladislas pulled her close, his voice thick with emotion. "I remember, and now we're creating new memories, building a future we could only have dreamed of then." Their moment of reflection was interrupted by a sudden movement from Ilinca. She gasped, her hand flying to her stomach. "Vladislas, the baby! I felt it move." Joy spread across Vladislas's face as he placed his hand gently on her bump. For a moment they stood in silent wonder, feeling the first flutters of their child. "Our little one is strong," Vladislas murmured, his eyes shining with unshed tears, "just like its mother." Ilinca laughed softly, her own eyes misting over. "And brave like its father. This child will unite not just our bloodlines but our entire nation." As they made their way back to the palace, arm in arm, the weight of their responsibilities settled over them once more. The work of unification would be challenging, fraught with political pitfalls and resistance from those who feared change. In the study, they found Constantine waiting with a stack of documents. "The initial proposals for unification, Your Majesties," he said, gesturing to the papers. "There's much to be done." Vladislas nodded, his face set with determination. "Indeed there is. But first," he turned to Ilinca, taking her hands in his. "My love, I think it's time we shared our joyous news with the people. Let them see that as Romania grows, so too does the royal family." Ilinca's face lit up with a radiant smile. "Yes, let's give them another reason to hope, to believe in the future we're building together." As they stepped out onto the palace balcony, the square below filled with citizens eager to hear from their beloved rulers, Vladislas raised his hands and a hush fell over the crowd. "People of Romania," he began, his voice carrying clearly in the crisp winter air. "Today marks the beginning of a new chapter in our nation's history. Delegates from Wallachia and Moldavia have come to us with a vision of a united Romania, strong and free." A murmur of excitement rippled through the crowd. Vladislas continued, his voice growing stronger. "This path will not be easy. There will be challenges, sacrifices to be made. But together, we can build a Romania that will stand tall among the nations of Europe." Ilinca stepped forward, her voice joining his. "And as our nation grows, so too does the royal family. We are overjoyed to announce that we are expecting a child, an heir that will embody the unity and hope of our great nation." The square erupted in cheers, the joy of the people palpable in the air. As Vladislas and Ilinca stood hand in hand, waving to their subjects, they felt the weight of history on their shoulders. But it was a weight they would gladly bear, for the love they shared and the future they were building. As night fell over Bucharest, casting long shadows across the snow-covered streets, Vladislas and Ilinca retired to their chambers. The excitement of the day had left them exhilarated, but exhausted. "Do you think we can do it?" Ilinca asked softly as they prepared for bed. "Unite the kingdoms, raise a child, build this dream of a greater Romania?" Vladislas drew her into his arms, his voice filled with conviction. "With you by my side, my love, I believe we can accomplish anything. Our love has already overcome so much. What's a little nation building compared to that?" Ilinca laughed, snuggling closer to him. "When you put it that way, it almost sounds easy." As they drifted off to sleep, their hands intertwined. Both Vladislas and Ilinca knew that the path ahead would be challenging. But with their love as their foundation, the support of their people behind them, and the promise of a new generation to inspire them. They were ready to face whatever the future might bring. The story of the servant girl who became an empress, of the love that defied all odds and united a nation, was far from over. In fact, the most exciting chapters were just beginning to unfold. As spring blossomed across Romania, bringing new life to the land, the process of unification moved forward with cautious optimism. The palace in Bucharest had become a hub of constant activity, with delegates from Wallachia, Moldavia, and Transylvania coming and going, each day bringing new challenges and triumphs. One warm afternoon, Vladislas and Ilinca found themselves in the Grand Library, surrounded by stacks of documents and maps. Ilinca, now in her 7th month of pregnancy, shifted uncomfortably in her chair. "Are you all right, my love?" Vladislas asked, concern etching his features. Ilinca smiled reassuringly, rubbing her swollen belly. "Just the little one making its presence known. I think it's as eager for this unification as we are." Their quiet moment was interrupted by Constantine, who entered with a harried expression. "Your Majesties, I apologize for the intrusion, but we have a situation." Vladislas straightened, immediately alert. "What's happened, Constantine?" The advisor hesitated, his eyes darting between the emperor and empress. It's the nobles from Transylvania, sire. A group of them are threatening to withdraw from the unification talks. They claim their interests are being overlooked." Ilinca frowned, her brow furrowing in concern. "But we've bent over backwards to accommodate their requests. What more could they want?" Constantine sighed heavily. "They're demanding greater autonomy, Your Majesty, and they're using your heritage as a bargaining chip." Vladislas's eyes flashed dangerously. "Explain." "They're saying that with an empress of Draculesht blood, Transylvania's interests will always be secondary to Wallachia's. They're demanding a guarantee of equal representation in the new government." Ilinca's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with dismay. "But that's absurd. I've never even set foot in Wallachia." Vladislas began to pace, his mind racing. "This is a delicate situation. We can't afford to lose Transylvania's support, but we also can't allow them to manipulate us with baseless accusations." Ilinca stood, wincing slightly as she straightened. "We need to meet with them, Vladislas, face to face. Let them see that I'm not some Wallachian puppet, but a queen committed to all of Romania." Vladislas nodded slowly, a plan forming in his mind. "You're right, as always, my love. Constantine, arrange for a meeting with the Transylvanian delegation, but not here in the palace. We'll go to them." Constantine's eyes widened in surprise. "To Transylvania, sire, but in the Empress's condition?" Ilinca's voice was firm as she interjected. "My condition is precisely why we must go. Let them see their future queen, carrying the heir that will unite all our bloodlines. It's time to put these petty divisions behind us." As preparations for the journey began, tension filled the air. The trip to Transylvania was not without its risks, especially with Ilinca's advanced pregnancy. But both she and Vladislas knew the importance of this mission. The night before their departure, as they lay in bed, Vladislas pulled Ilinca close. "Are you sure about this, my love? We could send envoys." Ilinca shook her head, her voice soft but determined. "No, Vladislas. This is something we must do ourselves. Our child will be born into a united Romania, or not at all." The journey to Transylvania was long and arduous. As their carriage wound its way through the Carpathian Mountains, Ilinca marveled at the rugged beauty of the landscape. "To think," she mused, "all of this will soon be one nation, from the shores of the Black Sea to these majestic peaks." Vladislas squeezed her hand, his eyes alight with vision. "And beyond, my love, this is just the beginning of what we can achieve together." As they approached the ancient city of Alba Iulia, where the Transylvanian nobles awaited them, a crowd began to gather along the road. To their surprise, the people were cheering, waving flags and throwing flowers. "They're welcoming us," Ilinca said, her voice filled with wonder. "Perhaps the nobles don't speak for everyone after all." Their arrival at the great hall of Alba Iulia was met with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. The Transylvanian nobles, resplendent in their traditional attire, watched warily as Vladislas helped Ilinca from the carriage. Count Mihaly Teleki, the leader of the dissenting faction, stepped forward. "Your Majesties," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "Welcome to Transylvania. We did not expect you to come in person." Vladislas's voice was firm as he replied, "Some matters are too important to be left to envoys, Count Teleki. The future of our united Romania is at stake." As they made their way into the hall, whispers followed in their wake. Many eyes were drawn to Ilinca's prominent belly, a visible symbol of the future they were all fighting for. The negotiations that followed were intense and often heated. For hours, they debated the finer points of governance, representation, and cultural preservation. Through it all, Ilinca remained a steady presence at Vladislas's side, her quiet dignity and obvious commitment to all of Romania's people, slowly winning over even the most skeptical nobles. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the hall, Count Teleki raised his hand for silence. "Your Majesties," he began, his voice heavy with emotion. "When we first raised our concerns, we did so out of fear that our voice would be lost in this new united Romania. But seeing you here, seeing the lengths you've gone to understand our perspective," he paused, looking around at his fellow nobles. "We were wrong to doubt your commitment to all of Romania's people." A murmur of agreement rippled through the assembled nobles. Vladislas stood, his voice ringing out clear and strong. "We do not seek to erase the unique identities of Wallachia, Moldavia, or Transylvania. Rather, we aim to weave them together into a tapestry more beautiful and resilient than any single thread could be alone." Ilinca joined him, her hand resting protectively over her belly. "Our child," she said, her voice filled with emotion, "will be born of Wallachian, Moldavian, and yes, Transylvanian blood. It will embody the unity we seek to create, not uniformity, but harmony in our diversity." As she spoke, a hush fell over the hall. Even the most hardened skeptics found themselves moved by the sincerity in her words and the visible proof of Romania's future growing within her. Suddenly, Ilinca gasped, her hand flying to her stomach. Vladislas was at her side in an instant, concern etched on his face. "Ilinca, what's wrong?" She looked up at him, her eyes wide with a mixture of surprise and joy. "The baby. I think it's coming." The hall erupted in a flurry of activity. As Ilinca was rushed to a nearby chamber, attended by the best midwives in Transylvania, Vladislas found himself surrounded by nobles offering support and well-wishes. Count Teleki approached. His earlier hostility completely vanished. "Your Majesty," he said, his voice grave, "let it be known that from this day forward, Transylvania stands firmly behind the unification. Your child, born on our soil, will be a symbol of the bonds that unite us all." Hours passed in a blur of tension and anticipation. Vladislas paced the halls, alternating between worry for Ilinca and amazement at how quickly the political landscape had shifted. Finally, as dawn broke over the mountains, casting a golden light across Alba Iulia, a cry rang out, the first wail of a newborn child. Vladislas rushed into the chamber to find Ilinca, exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle in her arms. "My love," she whispered as he approached. "Meet your son, the first prince of a truly united Romania." As Vladislas took his son in his arms, tears of joy streaming down his face, he knew that this moment marked not just the birth of an heir, but the birth of a new era for their nation. Word spread quickly through the city and beyond. Bells rang out across Transylvania, then across Wallachia and Moldavia. Bonfires were lit on mountaintops, carrying the news across the land. The prince born in Alba Iulia became a living symbol of unity, a tangible representation of the future they were all working towards. In the days that followed, as Ilinca regained her strength and the baby prince was formally presented to the people, the last obstacles to unification seemed to melt away. Nobles who had been hesitant now clamored to pledge their support. Common people from all regions sent gifts and well-wishes, their joy transcending old borders and prejudices. As they prepared to return to Bucharest, now a family of 3, Vladislas and Ilinca stood on the balcony of the great hall, looking out over the cheering crowds. "We did it," Ilinca said softly, cradling their son. "Not just unification, but something even greater. We've given them hope, Vladislas. Hope for a future where old divisions no longer matter. Vladislas pulled them both close, his heart full to bursting. And this is just the beginning, my love. Just think of the Romania our son will inherit. Strong, united, ready to take its place among the great nations of Europe. As they embarked on the journey home, the cheers of the people ringing in their ears, both Vladislas and Ilinca knew that while challenges still lay ahead, they had overcome the greatest obstacle of all, fear of change. With their love as a foundation, their son as inspiration, and the support of a united people behind them, the future of Romania shone brighter than ever before. The story of the servant girl who became an empress, of the love that defied all odds and united a nation, had entered a new chapter. And as their carriage wound its way through the Carpathian Mountains, Vladislas and Ilinca knew that the greatest adventures of their lives were still to come.